Today, I would like to tell you a story. Japan, now known as a peaceful land filled with culture and tradition. But Japan was not always as peaceful as it is now. There used to be a time where power was not won through crude interviews on national television. But instead, through military force. So let's rewind the clock back to 15th century Japan, back to the time where everyone killed each other, also known as the Japanese Warring States period, or in Japanese, the Sengoku Jidai. But before I could explain you what happened, I first need to prescribe you a cure for your ignorance and explain the Japanese feudal system. The Japanese Middle Ages came much later than in the rest of the world. Historians typically place the start dates in 1185 at the end of the Genpei War. The time before the Genpei War was the Heian period and is often called the Japanese Classical period. And it is where the Emperor of Japan had all the power to the country. It is also the time where major samurai clans started popping up. The two elite classes of Heian Japan were the nobles, who all lived inside the capital, and the samurai families, who were the military aristocratic elites of Japan, who all lived outside the capital of Kyoto and had the role of keeping the peasants out in line with the emperor and his policies. The nobles and samurai had radically different lifestyles, with the nobles valuing the pursuit of the arts and the samurai valued hard work and martial discipline above all else. These differences in lifestyle and values eventually became so great as to cause a civil war, which the samurai eventually won. Japan's political and social structure shifted dramatically from an imperial aristocratic to a feudal system dominated by the samurai class. The victorious Minamoto no Yoritomo established the shogunate, Japan's first warrior government. The emperor was still allowed to still be the emperor and live in giant castles and have expensive things, but he would be kept as a religious figurehead. Now, society was organized like so. Shogun at the top, then followed by the Kanrei, then the daimyo, provincial governors, then tax collectors, then minor landholders, samurai retainers, artisans, and merchants, and then what you are, a peasant. The Kamakura turned out to be a strong and stable government. Unlike your democracies, well, it turned out to be stable until it wasn't. If you were a 14th century Japanese aristocrat, I regret to inform you that the Kamakura shogunate did not in fact stand the test of time. The late 13th century was a terrible time to live in East Asia, as a barbarian named Temujin, also known as Genghis Khan, decided he had to conquer half of the universe. But by 1227, he died suddenly, and the rest of the world blew a huge sigh of relief. But anxiety still loomed in Asia, as Genghis' son became the new emperor of China. By 1274, Kublai Khan wished to be remembered as a legend, much like his father, and tried to accomplish the conquest of the century, and sent a fleet filled with horsemen to Japan. Luckily for Japan, once they landed, the horsemen were blown by a tornado. This event was later immortalized as Kamikaze, or the Divine. Despite being victorious, Japan spent so much money preparing for the invasion that it eventually went broke. Once the 14th century rolled in, the Emperor Go-Daigo sought to fix all of Japan's financial problems and planned to overthrow the shogunate. Many samurai supported him, and eventually civil war broke out, which Go-Daigo won. Unfortunately for Go-Daigo, eventually the daimyo soured on him as they hated his policies that would undermine the samurai class, especially his attempt to revive the system that was present back during the Heian. As such, the daimyo had to overthrow him to keep the peace. So they started another civil war shortly after overthrowing the shogun. Go-Daigo was not totally alone, however. and still had the support of many southern daimyos. The north was led by Ashikaga Takauji, who was a former imperial ally, but fell out with the imperial family over political disagreements. The north won the war, and as such they established the Ashikaga shogunate, who ruled Japan from 1336 to 1537. Fast forward 200 years, and Ashikaga Yoshimasa was current shogun. Yoshimasa was not much of a politician. He preferred to study the arts in his garden. Since he didn't much care about ruling or his dynasty, he decided to convince his brother, Yoshimi, to stop being a monk and become shogun after his death. Yoshimi had the support of one of the biggest daimyo, the Hosokawa clan. However, the next year, Yoshimasa was surprised by the birth of a son, Ashikaga Yoshihisa. Yoshihisa's mother pleaded Yoshimasa to make Yoshihisa his heir, but he did not do anything, leaving Yoshihisa without support to his claim to the shogunate. Luckily for Yoshihisa, he had the support of another big daimyo, the Yamana clan. The Hosokawa clan and the Yamana clan were long-time rivals, and their familiar dispute presented an opportunity to destroy each other. And so they did. This war was almost exclusively fought in the capital and had devastating consequences. Almost 3/4 of the city and surrounding areas were obliterated and severely weakened the shogun's authority. And where was the shogun, you may be asking? Well, the shogun was in his home just outside the city, reading poetry, making paintings, and just generally having a nice, relaxing time. While the city was being destroyed, after the Onin War, the authority had diminished, and with a powerless emperor and a severely weakened shogun, a giant power vacuum was created, providing the perfect habitat for 150 years of conflict. It's at this point where groups of militant Buddhist monks following the Jodo Shinshu sect, known as the Iko-Iki, started rebelling all across Japan. But what is Jodo Shinshu? It was a sect of Buddhism which followed the teachings of Renyo, who emphasized on universal salvation, the equality of all, and that food should be available for everyone, which resonated deeply with the peasant class. By 1473, the peasants grew mad with the daimyo of Kaga province, Masachika, and rebelled many times, all which failed. Eventually, luck came to the Iko-Iki's side in 1487, as Masachika left on a military campaign and the Iko-Iki had managed to amass 100,000 men. And with now tactical and numerical superiority, they rebelled against Masachika, this time succeeding, forcing him to commit seppuku. And gradually, the Iko-Iki increased their control in the province and killed every noble in sight. The rise of the Iko-Iki sent shockwaves across Japan, and many daimyo were scared similar rebellions would occur in their own provinces, which meant they and their ideas had to be brutally suppressed. Now, the first 40 years of the conflict are pretty uninteresting, so I'll just introduce the major clans that survived until the 1510s, with the beginning of Sengoku Jidai. The two clans with the highest falls were the mighty, but now pretty alright, Yamana and Hosokawa clans. The Ochi, existing by the time of the Mongols, during the beginning of the Sengoku Jidai, they were the dominant economic and military power in the West, with a huge navy, control of the Kanmon Strait, and exclusive trade between Japan and China, the Yamago. They would rise to prominence after conquering the Yamana provinces in Shugoku. They had a very strong army and played a major role in the region. The Takeda. Originally dispersed in many regions in Japan, the Takeda had 3 great provinces and had incredible cavalry, which was feared throughout all of Japan. The Imagawa. Being an old and renowned clan, the Imagawa were one of the most stable and prosperous clans during the Sengoku Jidai. The Uesugi. They were the largest power in the east, holding more than 4 provinces at the start. Now, to the start of actually interesting things. During the Sengoku Jidai, there was a common phenomenon. Someone that was of lower or even insignificant origins could achieve power through stratagem. This came to be known as Gekkokujo, which means the lower toppling the higher. Which in turn means that yes, even you peasants could become samurai. But don't get any ideas. Only a few actually managed to do it. This was the basis of the Sengoku Jidai, which were the new kids on the block and were ready to undermine the power of all Shugo daimyo. Since the Sengoku daimyo had power based on military achievements rather than hereditary succession like the Shugo were, they were more equipped for the radical changes of the Sengoku period. The best example of a Sengoku daimyo in action was the re-establishment of the extinct Hojo clan by a lower-ranking samurai named Ise Shinkuro. Before his ascension, Ise Shinkuro was a retainer, basically a samurai for hire, working for the Imagawa clan. During this time, the Imagawa had a succession crisis between Imagawa, Uchichika, and Oshika Norimitsu. Shinkuro was a mediator in this crisis, and when Norimitsu overthrew Uchichika, Shinkuro came to his defense. After a short victory, Shinkuro was rewarded with Kokokuji Castle. A decade later, another petty succession crisis in Izu gave Shinkuro the opportunity to invade the province, making him de facto independent from the Imagawa. After the conquest of Izu, the previous big dog in the region, the Uesugi clan, splintered into 3 over territorial and familial disputes over petty familial squabbles. In the north, Yamanouchi took control, and in the south, the Ogegayatsu. Oh, and there was also the Fukuzawa, but they don't matter, so I'll stop talking about them. But Shinkuro's conquest would not stop there, and he attempted to invade Uesugi-controlled Sagami province. He captured Odawara and died shortly thereafter. With his death in 1519, his son renamed the clan after the Hojo clan, who were a strong and influential clan inside the Kamakura shogunate. He also changed his father's name to Hojo Soun. Now that the Uesugi were severely weakened, Hojo Ujitsuna, the son of Hojo Soun, now had free reign over Musashi, marching towards Ogegayatsu-controlled Edo, or if you're uncultured, Tokyo. The capture of Edo put the Hojo and Ujitsuna on the map, and as such, an ally of the Ogegayatsu Uesugi, the Satomi clan, planned to kick the Hojo out of Musashi. They and their idiotic commanders wished to demoralize the Hojo by plundering the city of Kamakura, the capital of the previous shogun. In 1526, they executed their plan. The attack was successful. Kamakura was burned to the ground. However, the attack did not result in a Hojo retreat of Musashi, and as such, with the Satomi demoralized and disappointed themselves, Satomi forces had to go back home. In the west, there were 2 big clans in Chugoku region, the Ouchi and the Yamato. These clans would frequently come into conflict following the Onin War. Nothing came of these endless wars. However, a new power would come to dominate the West was starting to take shape. Now, it may not look like much, but trust me, at the start, the Mori clan were a minor samurai family from Maki, which at this point was mostly controlled by the Takeda clan. The Mori at this point were vassals of the Ouchi, which brought them into conflict with their larger neighbor. However, the Ouchi were busy in Kyoto supporting the shogun in an internal conflict. It is when an influential military leader came into the scene, Mori Motonari. Motonari, born as Sojumaru, was the son of Mori Hiromoto. In 1499, Hiromoto found himself at war with the Amago. As such, Hiromoto offered vassalization to the Ouchi. 7 years later, he died and left his first son, Okimoto, as the daimyo. However, Okimoto would die 10 years later. In 1560, the passing of Okimoto would leave a young 24-year-old Motonari as daimyo. So the Takeda capitalized from a young and inexperienced Motonari and invaded Mori territory. Motonari, however, proved to be a great commander. Mori Motonari is remembered as one of the most brilliant tacticians of the Sengoku period. He had an incredible ability for outmaneuvering his enemies. He pioneered the three arrows strategy, which emphasized coordinated attacks and the strength of unified forces, both in battle and in maintaining loyalty within his clan. Motonari's forces were also known for utilizing guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and surprise attacks. He understood the importance of leveraging the terrain and unpredictable attacks to destabilize stronger enemies. Motonari was not only a good commander, but an incredible admiral as well. He mastered the use of naval forces in conjunction with land-based operation, which allowed him to maintain control over trade routes and supply lines. Motonari was also flexible, never marrying to one style of combat. One example of his strategy can be seen in the Battle of Arita Nakaide. Initially, the Mori would engage a small guarding Takeda force until the main bulk arrived. When the main force arrived, the Mori and Takeda would position themselves at opposite sides of the Matoshi River. The Takeda ran through the river, drenching the armor of Takeda forces. Motonari's forces would be constantly pushed back by incoming Takeda until the daimyo of the western Takeda, Motoshige, would be struck by a Mori arrow, killing him. The Takeda had set out to take Goriyama Castle, but found his troops intercepted and routed by the numerically inferior Mori clan. At the end of the war in 1523, Motonari seized all of Aki, making him de facto independent from the Ouchi, although still technically a part of it. During the Sengoku Jidai, the Takeda clan rose to prominence in central Japan. During the 1520s, the Takeda were controlled by the ambitious Takeda Nobutora, who engaged in conflicts with neighbors constantly. Eventually, the constant raids would come to bite him, as many lesser daimyo in Shinano formed a coalition to ward off Nobutora. The Hojo and Imagawa raided against the Takeda as well. This could have been devastating, but luckily for the Takeda, the Satomi capitalized on a distracted Hojo and invaded Hojo-controlled Musashi. The Takeda managed to fend off Imagawa incursions into their territory. Shortly after the brief conflict, the Imagawa clan faced a succession crisis between Imagawa Ujiteru and Imagawa Yoshimoto. Ujiteru needed allies in the crisis, and Nobutoru stepped in to fill that role, leading to a strong alliance between the Imagawa and Takeda clans. And now, with the south cleared, Nobutoru had free reign to conquer Shinano, though these campaigns were not as successful as he expected, as he never managed to fully conquer the province. Although his campaigns were limited, they provided his son Takeda Harunobu, the later Shingen, with early military experience, knowledge he would put to use in 1541 in his own invasion of Shinano. Takeda Shingen was a brilliant strategist, a master of both offensive and defensive combat. He was known for his ability to exploit terrain, conduct swift maneuvers, and maintain discipline among his troops. He heavily used cavalry in quick, coordinated charges and followed the Furikazan doctrine, which upheld speed, defense, and discipline. The Imagawa alliance with the Takeda would cause conflict with the Hojo. In 1535, the murder of the daimyo of the Matsudaira clan would cause a 10-year-old boy to ascend the throne. This is when the Imagawa would seize the opportunity and vassalize the Matsudaira clan, effectively giving control of Mikawa to the Imagawa.
With a preoccupied Hojo, the Satomi clan tried to play its luck once again, this time with the help from the shogun. The Satomi gathered an army to attack the Hojo's Musashi outposts. Ujitsuna hastily assembled troops from Izu and Satomi, pausing to assemble them at Edo, before moving on to Konodai, in Kasuza. The Hojo defeated the Satomi Ashikaga army easily. The Hojo seized Konodai and would rout the Satomi clan down the Bozo Peninsula. In 1541, after creating Sonjin Temple and rebuilding Kamakura, Ujitsuna would finally die.
Back in the west, the Yamago clan in 1523 were a dominant force. The Yamago leader, Tsunehisa, died in 1538, being replaced by Haruhisa. Haruhisa continued the expansion of the Yamago started by his father, taking many provinces held by the remnants of the Yamana. Haruhisa was still not content, and in 1540 he turned his attention to Aki province. He declared war against the Mori. Motonari successfully defended Yoshida Koriyama Castle against the incoming, numerically superior Amago. Motonari then struck in 1542 with a series of coordinated attacks against the Amago in the Iwami Peninsula. Motonari easily overran Amago forces, and by the end of the year, Motonari was sieging Gasentoro Castle. However, by the time he reached the castle, his allies were tired and retreated shortly after reaching the castle. Without enough military support, Motonari had to retreat himself. During the retreat, Motonari almost lost his life, but his general, Watanabe Hajime, tried to sacrifice he can get away safely to Aki province. This war set the stage for Mori Motonari's later conquests, eventually leading to the destruction of both the Amago and Ouchi clans. And with that, we end the story for now. Thanks for attending this lecture about the Sengoku period.